Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to WURD Speaks the Meeting. I'm Sarah Lomax-Reese, and I'm the President and General Manager of 900 AM WURD. And we are happy to be launching the inaugural event, the first event in the newly named Walter P. Lomax Jr. MD Speaker Series. So tonight is the very first official event in that series. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Dr. Walter Lomax, he was the founder and owner of WURD. He was my father, and he was an amazing person who I know is here tonight because he loved Pastor Waller, he loved Malefi Asante, he greatly respected and appreciated Tariq El-Shabazz and Mark Lamont Hill, and I don't know if he knew Dr. Callahan, but I know he would love and respect her if he did know her. So his spirit is totally and completely in this building tonight, because he would be sitting right up there if he were here on this plane. So I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Pastor Waller started talking to me about this play and this collaboration months and months and months ago, and he first mentioned it, and he didn't have to say more than 3 words, and I was like, yes, WURD is in, I'm in, let's do it. And so, you know, I know that this panel discussion is going to be amazing. It cannot be anything other than amazing with these incredible minds and voices on the stage tonight. It's going to be amazing because it's going to be led by Barbara Grant, who hosts a show on WURD and does so many other things. And I want to take a moment and thank our sponsors. They allow us to do the kinds of community outreach events that we do on the regular. Universal Companies has been our presenting sponsor since 2009 when we started our WURD Speak series. Sugar House is one of our sponsors, and Comcast NBC 10. So I want to thank all of them for their ongoing support in our speaker series. I also want to just acknowledge the WURD staff that's here. Can you guys stand up, because this is really a collective, a collaborative. So I wanted to just acknowledge the WURD staff. There's a bunch of WURDies back there. Phil Allen, our new morning show host with the pink tie over there. So please introduce yourself, get to know all of our staff after the panel discussion. And apparently a cell phone was left out front. So if somebody lost their cell phone, I'm sure it will at some point appear out in the lobby with one of the WURD staff. So there is a cell phone that has been found. Also, please turn off your cell phones now. There's no audio or videotaping with your cell phones for tonight. So please acknowledge that. And I just want to call your attention to this card that you all got. This is our next event about crowdfunding. That's going to be on April 10th. And so hopefully you will come out and join us for that wonderful event. So right now I'm going to get things started and introduce Barbara Grant, our moderator. Barbara Grant is one of 2 founding partners of Cardenas Grant Communications. Her client roster includes Ameristar Casinos, United Negro College Fund, Edison Learning, City of Philadelphia, National Conference of African Americans and AIDS, Pennsylvania Coalition of Charter Schools, Free Library of Philadelphia, Nielsen Media Research, Sunoco Welcome America, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Insurance Department's Children's Health Insurance Program in the African American market. Barbara is a Wharton School MBA graduate, and prior to starting Cardenas Grant, Barbara was Director of Communications for the Mayor of Philadelphia, and prior to city service, Barbara was Director of Communications for the School District of Philadelphia, And Barbara built her expertise in advertising, communications, and media relations during her 15 years as an award-winning television reporter, producer, and news manager with a strong reputation for coverage of minority affairs and traditional audiences. Barbara is currently the host of Talking Drumline, which airs every Monday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. on 900 a.m. WURD. But before you come out, Barbara, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my family who's sitting in the front, Thomas and Jackie and Walter and my cousins and everybody, so I wanted to do that too. Got to stay good with the family. But welcome Barbara Grant, who will be our moderator for today's program. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the panel.
Good evening, and thank you for coming. Now, there are a couple of ways that people hear the words turn off your cell phone. Okay, some of y'all put it on stun or silent. I'm saying to you to either turn them off completely or put it on setting airplane mode. No buzzing, no zitting, no little zings. I see you reaching in your pocket, right, because they need to fix it up. Anyway, but thank you really for that. And thank you again for coming. This play, The Meeting, it's a one-act play about a really historic moment that should have happened in recent memory. And no one would be more qualified to talk about it than our panel tonight. And I want to kind of get right to introducing them. The premise of The Meeting is this what if. But in this instance, it was a momentous what if, and could be described as something that raised one of the major questions of our time and defined the schism, the strength, and the unity we experienced in the civil rights, human rights, Black power movement of the 60s, the one that resulted in so many of the things that we enjoy today, and also so many of the frustrations that we experience today, because I think a lot of us think that something happened to it, and that movement didn't carry forward the way that it was intended. But the play is about these two major human rights leaders in the 60s, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, who were able, at least fictionally, to meet and to try to resolve their differences and combine their forces to push a unified social justice agenda. It never happened, but I think that we want to keep that question in our minds as we go through the discussion tonight. What if they were able to do this and push a social justice agenda? Where would we be today? What would it mean in terms of how we look to the future? Meeting's not just about a physical meeting, but a meeting of minds and hearts and the nurturing of a movement. And as one of our panelists said in the green room just before this discussion, we hope that we have invited you to the beginning of a new movement and a new future for our people. So with that, let me introduce our panel. And you know, the thing that the play is about also is this great intellectual divide that could be overcome between these amazing men. And it would be remiss of me to tell you that, not to tell you that our panel, there is so much gray matter on this panel. It is just astounding. I mean, the men and the women on this panel are really truly representatives of the thought leaders of our generation. First, to my left, Dr. Molefi Asante, professor and chair of the Department of African American Studies at Temple University, president of Molefi Kete Asante Institute. He is considered by his peers to be one of the most distinguished contemporary scholars of our time. Dr. Asante is the founder of the theory of Afrocentricity and has published 75 books and 500 articles on African American history and culture. And we'll welcome you to the stage, Dr. Asante. To his left, Tariq El-Shabazz, Esquire. Tariq Karim El-Shabazz is managing and founding partner of the litigation boutique El-Shabazz and Harris. He is one of the stars of our play, The Meeting, this weekend. He stars as Malcolm X. Mr. Shabazz has practiced complex civil and criminal litigation in both federal and state court for more than 18 years. He is referred to by Philadelphia newspapers and his peers as Philadelphia's own Johnny Cochran. Mr. El-Shabazz has been featured as one of Pennsylvania's super lawyers. He's highly sought after as a legal analyst with many of the networks, ABC, CBS, Fox News, Comcast. Welcome. And beside him is his co-star in the play this weekend, and many of you know him, Reverend Dr. Alan Waller, the senior pastor of Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church in Philadelphia. He stars as Dr. Martin Luther King in this weekend's production. He's a highly sought-after revivalist, lecturer, musician. Dr. Waller is a true visionary. He earned a Master's of Divinity from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and is a Doctor of Ministry in Marriage and Family from the Palmer Institute, Palmer Theological Seminary, formerly known as the Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary, here in Wynwood, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Dr. Alan Waller. To his left, another doctor, Dr. Mark Lamont Hill. Dr. Hill is one of the leading intellectual voices in the country today. He's the host of HuffPost Live and BET News, as well as a political contributor for CNN. He's the former host of the nationally syndicated television show Our World with Black Enterprise, and a political contributor to Fox News Channel. He's an award-winning journalist and is a member of the faculty of Columbia University as Associate Professor of Education at the Teachers College there. Welcome, Dr. McDermott. And last but not least, certainly, Reverend Dr. Leslie Callahan. On May 17th, 2009, the congregation at historic St. Paul's Baptist Church, located here in Philadelphia, called Reverend Callahan as the church's first female pastor. Dr. Callahan delivered her first sermon as St. Paul's pastor, entitled It's Time, appropriately. Committed to education, Dr. Callahan earned her Bachelor's of Arts degree in religion from Harvard University at Radcliffe, has a Master of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in religion from Princeton University. Dr. Callahan was ordained in 1997 at Judson Memorial Church. Welcome, Dr. Callahan, and a hand for all of our panelists. As we consider this question that is raised in the meeting, I think I first want to find out where you are philosophically. So I want to say ask to each of our panelists, are you a Malcolm person or a Martin person? Because as you know, at the time when these two men walked the earth, it kind of put us into buckets. And intellectually, in terms of class, in terms of many things. And so I want to see if that kind of carried forward, and then we'll talk a whole lot in this next hour about how those two paths united.
Barbara, I'm going to thank you for that, and I want to just jump in. Thank you so much, and thank you.
We need mics. I think
they told me turn on. Is it on?
Pass down, or do you have a body mic?
Is it on? They gave it to me.
Can we get up the sound for our panelists?
He doesn't need a mic. Go ahead.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now we can hear Timmy.
Go ahead, bro.
Is it on there now? Let me have a.
There you go.
I want to thank you for that. The very purpose of the play, the very purpose of this gathering, is to actually get away from that question. The reality is these are two great giants in our community. They are great leaders. They brought great ideas to the table. They come from different faiths, but some of their differences were as much about being from the North and the South as it was anything else. What we want to get across even over this weekend is that we don't have to choose a winner. We don't have to pick which one was right. We have to pick from both of them, but we also have to critique them because we have the benefit of living after them. We also have to remember that we don't get necessarily all that we could get from Malcolm, because the body of work that we have and know about him is pre-Mecca. He was killed so close after his Hajj that a lot of that material is even absent from us. And that Dr. King, we only think of him as a dreamer, and there's so much more to him that America would not like us to know, that we need to embrace. And so what we want to do is move away from trying to pick a winner or pick a camp and recognize that they both inform us. And in fact, what this is really about is that we don't have the luxury today of choosing sides as African American, black, colored people in Philadelphia. We have, and I use those terms somewhat humorously, but we have something that ties us together, whatever our faith is. In fact, what we want to do is not have the conversation of whose faith is right. What we want to do is change the conversation and push the conversation towards how do we stand on common ground around our blackness and address the issues that are going on in our community.
So this is why I said we didn't need a microphone.
Okay, I was going to say, we'd like to hear from the entire panel on that question. Yeah.
Because one of the beauties, one of the most beautiful things of having the opportunity to work with my brother, and let me say that again, my brother, because he is my brother in every sense of the word. We have been able to develop. We have been able to develop and to forge a relationship that we pray that people look at. What we want to get away from is rhetoric. We have a lot of talking heads. People talk all the time. We want to get to the position of character. Are the people living the things that they're talking? So when we say that, and you see Pastor Wall and you see Tariq El-Shabazz, you see brothers. We're not talking about it now and not going to talk about it tomorrow and won't talk about it just Sunday. But anyone that has an opportunity, especially our families, because they know how crazy we are, but anyone that has an opportunity to actually see us interact, you see sincerity. And that's what we have to deal with. At the end of the day, no one stops anyone in by a police car in a driven car because he's a Muslim or he's a Christian or he lives in Oak Lane as opposed to North Philadelphia. They stop him because he looks like us. And the educational systems that we have here in Philadelphia is not just decrepit because someone is a Muslim or Christian or they're from North Philadelphia or Chestnut Hill, but it's because it's public and they're African American. So if we begin to shape that conversation, if we begin to look at that conversation, if we cut out the rhetoric and we get to actual action, we will be surprised what will happen in the next 4 years. We have some major elections coming up, and this is my brother's favorite line. We got a major election coming up within the next 3 years every year, from mayor to governor to president. And you want to sleep it if you want to.
That's right.
But our rights are getting taken away.
That's right.
Our children are being miseducated and undereducated. And we sitting around here talking about whose philosophy we like the best.
Right.
Let me... Dr. Callahan? Oh, okay, Dr. Callahan, then Dr. Asante.
I'll actually yield to Dr. Asante,
All right.
who is the elder on the panel.
Don't claim it, don't claim it.
And I accept that. No, I accept that. Thank you very much. But I want to just get back to the notion of the meeting itself, because historically, you see, we have always had in our community several struggle streams. One of those struggle streams is represented, in a sense, by Martin Luther King Jr., and another one is represented by Malcolm X. But these struggle streams have always been with us, and they've been with us because of the variety of conditions that we have faced dealing with 500 years of European white racial domination. And consequently, by virtue of having to deal with it, we have often sought different ways of confronting it. That's what that represents. I mean, I remember when I was a student at UCLA, Shirley Graham Du Bois came to speak for us. And somebody asked her in the audience, well, tell me about the controversy between you and Booker T. Washington, your husband and Booker T. Washington. She says, well, my husband and Booker T. Washington worked together. They even wrote a book together, The Negro in America. You can look it up. So what she was saying was, yes, perhaps the media has created these great chasms, but ultimately, in terms of the objective, both Booker T. Washington and Du Bois were working for the objective of trying to uplift and raise the African American people. I think that's the same with King and Malcolm X. If you look at King and Malcolm X in the meeting, and this is very fascinating, hypothetical, but I think the meeting is also at another level very abstract, because what it is a meeting of these two movements in our community. That not just the personalities, but the meeting of these two movements. One says, look, if we're going to be people, real people who protect our families, protect ourselves, then we have to be willing to confront those who will confront us at any level. And then the other one says, but ultimately, in order for us to move, we also have to retain what we have gained and what we have brought here from the African continent, and that is the deep sense of spirituality that allows us to love as well. So not one or the other, but both of these are significant and important. And I think that that's where we have to begin.
Dr.
I'd like to build on that by just mentioning and reminding us of what we already know, which is that as human beings, we have a great capacity for complexity. And so if you look at the memory of Malcolm X and the memory of Martin Luther King Jr., and even during their lifetimes, people loved them both. Black people, particularly, loved them both. And they, you know, as a pastor, I'm well aware that the people who listen to me, even on a regular basis, may not agree with everything that I say. Indeed, I would guess that they don't agree with everything that I say. And yet, it is possible for them to love me and to follow me to the extent that they feel comfortable, while they listen to other people that they also love and follow. I think that the complexity of the people who hear and heard Martin King and Malcolm X and who read and think about their philosophy now, I think that has to be taken into consideration. I also think it's the complexity of these men as individuals themselves has to be taken into consideration. None of us wants to be known by our most radical statement. All of us are more complex than that, and our thought is more complex than that. And I think that the ways in which we boil down Martin King and Malcolm X, and even their philosophical and religious positions, to the thing that is the best soundbite, does a disservice to the complexity and the development and evolution of both of their thinking. And I'd like for us to keep that on the table, even as we try not to silo ourselves into particular camps. We might find that even if we did that, somebody would bring us something that Malcolm X or Martin King said that would make us feel like we were in the wrong camp.
I agree.
He agrees. And so, if we look then at the meeting of these two movements, because my contention has always been that they fit together like gloves, that you couldn't have done one without the other, that the Black Power movement and the Civil Rights movement really were two sides of the same coin. And if you look then at the fact that they both called for unity of purpose of our people in the struggle, they were both organizers, do we see a continuity in terms of movement? What happened to this movement? And as Dr. Waller would ask, where does it go from here?
Since you asked the question, you want to answer?
Well, I think two things. Number one, what happened to the movement is that some of us got complacent. We got comfortable with some of the advancement. We got comfortable with some of the opportunities and forgot those that either did not get the opportunities or take advantage of the opportunities. And so that's one piece. But I think another piece is that the previous discussion of how to do unity was what I would call color blindness and philosophical dullness, where in order to get along with someone else who is not my color, we would say things like, I don't see you as white, or I don't see you as black, I see you as human, and let's just get along. But to not see me as black, and I not see you as white, then I really don't see you. And you won't feel good there for long. But also, philosophical dullness would suggest that in order for us to get along, across religious lines. I don't see you as Muslim. I don't see you as Christian. I see you as human. But if you don't see that I am an evangelical Christian, if you don't see that, if I don't see that you're a Muslim, if I don't see that, then I don't really see you. And so that the next evolution, I think, of this is how do we have the conversation that truly honors the best of our religious tradition without the age-old argument of either trying to put it to the side or fight about who's right, but live above that and put the true test of whatever your philosophical, theological view is and put it in the street, and that is how you treat people and how do you deal with the issues of the day. And so I think if we get past that, then we can get back to the movement as it was meant to be.
And if we look at these two giants, if we look at, for example, Martin Luther King, and I guess you could tell now we got like this little tag team thing going on. The problem of analyzing Martin Luther King is that we analyze Martin Luther King at a stagnant time in his life, and if we do that to anybody, we do a disservice to them. We are changing. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago. And if you are the same person you were 10 years ago, you got a problem. So we all are growing. We're growing. We're developing intellectually, spiritually, emotionally. We're growing as men or as women. And we don't acknowledge that when we look at this giant. We don't acknowledge the growth of Malcolm X when we look at that giant. We allow people like Nicki Minaj, and don't you look crazy, some of you got a CD right now playing when you drove up. We got Nicki Minaj standing, having a picture of Malcolm X. Yeah. The same picture they show you all the time when they show you Malcolm X, with a rifle in his hand and peeking through a window as she has a song that talk about niggas. I mean, let's be real. So in order to really deal with where we have to go, we have to deal with the evolution of these guys that we respect. And where we have to go is we have to begin to examine ourselves as a culture. We can play with it all we want to, but when you're stripped of who you are, and you never get a feeling as to who you are, how in the hell are you going to know where you're going to go? Yeah, so we're stripped of that. Now, let me clarify that. I'm not telling you that you should put chocolate milk in your coffee, only eat chocolate cake, and don't eat nothing unless it's a double chocolate Oreo cookie. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying to you now is that we have to realize that culturally we are the same. We have to realize that culturally we need to move together. We have to understand that we have to move intellectually now. We can't win today's game with yesterday's score. So as we get caught up in reading books about our heroes, and the reason why I say our heroes, because white people don't choose between George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. They say they both great presidents. So as we get caught up into this debate amongst ourselves, we miss the point. The point is simply this. Folks, we are losing more rights than we ever had. We are losing our children daily on a constant basis. There are more African American women in jail than there are men. We are killing our babies. We are killing ourselves because we're caught in the whirlwind. And until we realize that culturally we have to move together, intellectually we have to move together. We have to move together instead of having the debate as to my way is the best way and your way isn't, but both ways are good, we're going to have a problem.
Dr. Hill?
I wish I could just sit and listen because everything that's been said is so powerful and I agree with all of it. First, I want to thank you all for inviting me here. I want to thank WURD for organizing this. I want to thank Reverend Waller for personally calling me. There are a few people who I will do anything for. He's one of those people. I have great love and admiration for the work he does here. Brother Shabazz, same thing. I've known of your work for a very long time now, and I remember many years ago seeing you advocating for some young men who the world thought was guilty, and you said they were not. And you fought tirelessly to make sure that they were freed, and it's that type of liberatory work that honors the spirit of Malcolm and Martin. Leslie Callahan I've known since graduate school, and I was a student, and she was a young professor who was brilliant, and she modeled for me that it is possible to live a principled and spirited life inside the academy and also do it so outside. And words can't really capture how significant Molefi Asante has been, not just to me personally, but really to the Black intellectual tradition. He really is one of the towering figures of the 20th century, now 21st century. So we give him great thanks for his leadership. I thought about your initial question, which we all sort of probably agree is not, it's a reasonable question, but we're moving beyond it and saying it's not either or, it's both and, as Molefi said, and I agree with that sentiment. And personally, for me, sometimes I'm a Malcolm dude, sometimes I'm a Martin dude, depending on what day it is, quite honestly. Really depend on the day, sometimes the hour. But I see things that cut across them that I think everyone has spoken to. And that I think we can pull out just for a second to think about how they both model a kind of life worth living and a kind of activist model for making the world a little bit better than we found it, which is what Reverend Waller was speaking to when he talked about these issues that are on the table for us. And I think one thing that we see in both of them is youth. Right now, they're both very young men. They both die at 39 years old. Malcolm dies February 25th, 65 in the Audubon Ballroom at 39 years old. Much of his life was taken from him through mass incarceration. But even his conversion experience in prison and what we see throughout his late 20s and early 30s is the work of a young man. Right. Martin King enters Morehouse at 15, finishes at 19. He's at Crozier, he's in Boston, he gets his PhD, he's in Selma, he's in Birmingham, he's in his late teens, he's in his early 20s. He dies April 4th, 68, and 68 at 39 years old once again. So, and for some of y'all, 39 is, if y'all young folk, y'all think 39 is not that old, or not that young, but trust me, it is. Right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right. Every year it gets younger and younger for me.
Absolutely young.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Absolutely.
So part of what we see is youth. And so when we think about the movement today, I think what Malcolm and Martin both represent is the kind of value of young people. We often have movements, some of which were created in the 50s and 60s and 70s, which are still led by the same people. Right. So if we're going to have a generation of people who knock their mothers and fathers off stage, we have to be willing to let our sons and daughters on. And I'm not convinced that we've done that. Some of us would rather have these organizations die around our arms than to give them to young people who have a new energy, a new vision, a new purpose. We have to do that. The second thing is we saw an ethic of risk. An ethic of risk in Martin and Malcolm, an ethic of risk. True leadership means that you have to be willing to put something on the line. When King is kicked, we remember King in a very particular way, at a very particular moment, as Tariq said, but we also remember him in a very particular kind of light, which may not be representative of how people saw him at the moment. That's right. You know, it was very risky in '63 to stand up. Absolutely. It was very risky in '67 to stand up. Not just against racism, not just promoting nonviolence, but also critiquing the war, also critiquing white supremacy, also speaking to poverty. There was an ethic of risk attached to what King did, and it wasn't just intellectual risk, it wasn't just philosophical risk, it was physical risk. He was stabbed before he was shot. Right. Malcolm understood and was haunted by the threat of death every single day. Malcolm didn't walk into the Audubon Ballroom naive with his eyes closed. Malcolm knew that he was threatened by death and chased by death every day, and yet he still stood out, not just on a national stage, but an international stage. Not just chased by Negroes with guns, but the CIA, the FBI, the police. Every single entity of power, both legal and illegal, was chasing Malcolm, yet he still stood out with an ethic of risk, willing to critique a government that was wrong, a white supremacist empire that was wrong. He did it, and that took an ethic of risk that we need to model right now, because some of us are very, no, don't clap, listen to what I'm saying, who are very interested in critiquing people when it's easy. That's right. But right now, there are people in Afghanistan. That's right. There are people in Yemen. There are people in Iran, Iraq. Many of them look like us, believe like us, who have been killed by predator drones. Right. That are being sent from D.C. Right. Our president. By the guy y'all voted for. Our president. Our president, my president too. I ain't here to bash Obama. What I'm saying is that the critique of George Bush's drones was easy. Talk about it. The critique of Bush's Iraq invasion was easy. But people in Iran and Afghanistan and Iraq don't feel better that they're Obama's drones. They don't feel comforted by the fact that it's Obama's invasion. So if we're going to have a critique, We didn't have a critique of everybody. We have a black mayor here in Philadelphia that's engaged in some of the most draconian stop and frisk and juvenile detention. Think about this. This is what I'm talking about. Now, they don't feel no better because the mayor is black. We did not march and fight to get beaten up or illegally searched by black police officers. So the ethic of risk can't be exhausted at the level of white people, can't be exhausted at the level of Republicans, can't be exhausted at the level of people who are our political opponents. The challenge of King was to speak to preachers too. He got kicked out of the National Baptist Convention. That's right. Ethic of risk. Wasn't allowed on Morehouse Board of Trustees. They say he was a bad influence on young people because he got locked up too much. Right, like he was a little boosted or something, right? Like he was getting locked up.
I gotta stop you, although I don't want to.
I got a third point, and I'm gonna take my seat.
All right, good.
I learned that from him. That's how you know they're getting warmed up. And I'll be real fast, I promise. The third point is they had a critique of empire. They had a critique of empire. When King stands there on August 28, 1963, at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, he wasn't just critiquing the lack of color blindness. He wasn't just promoting integration. He was calling, in my estimation, for reparations.
That's right.
Yeah.
I come here to cash a check. I refuse to believe the great vaults of democracy could be empty.
Right.
So, for me, the legacy of King was a critique of empire. Racism, poverty, militarism, empire. Vietnam War, empire. Malcolm was critiquing, Malcolm was prepared to go for the United Nations. Human rights abuses of the United States. Empire. He wasn't just worried about the individual bad luck cop or a bad intention cop, or he wasn't just worried about Bull Connor. They were talking about an empire that normalizes white supremacy, that normalizes militarism, that normalizes poverty, and that keeps reproducing the same reality. So if we're gonna follow that legacy, let's not pick, let's get all that stuff together, dump out the stuff we don't need, but keep those three dimensions and anything else we want to talk about.
So Dr. Hill, you have just relieved a great deal of my anxiety about passing the baton on to the next generation. Seriously. And raise the question that we need to call here tonight, if we're looking at movement and looking forward, how do we pass the baton on to the next generation? What is our obligation? I remember Bill Gray resigning and handing off to the new pastor at Bright Hope Baptist Church, Reverend Kevin Johnson. And one of the things that Bill said was, I don't want to die in the pulpit. You know, because clearly we need, part of our obligation is to groom a new generation. And if we say to ourselves that the movement died because we became complacent, Reverend, what that says to me is we didn't think about how to pass that baton on carefully enough. So how do we engage this new generation to be on fire like Mark Lamont Hill?
Can I take one step back?
You absolutely can.
I want to take one step back. Because I think I appreciate the large frame that Mark has placed and the common frame that Mark has placed Dr. King and Malcolm X in. The other thing, though, I think that they both shared was a very robust and deep sense of the value of humanity.
Yes.
And so there's a way in which, Pastor Waller, I agree with you that we can use the notion of humanity in a way that undermines actually this larger, deeper, robust sense of what it means to have value just because you are a human being. And I think not only is that something that they have in common, and I think it's an important thing that we have to deal with as an internal critique, because I think some of our justice work within the African American community is undermined by our incapacity to see the humanity of one another. And I also think this is a big part of answering the question that you're just asking about how do we deal with the generations that are following us. And a good place to start would be to see children as human. So that we have a problem with this. I won't begin to try to figure out exactly where the problem comes from, but it's a big piece. I believe it's a big piece of the difficulty we have around justice and mass incarceration. I think it's also a big piece of the lack of investment, the divestment in education. We're not so sure ourselves that our children are worth it. And there are things that we say and do consistently that speak to our uncertainty around this. And so, you know, we were talking in the green room about the things that we see. And we always start with these kids. But they didn't drop here from some other planet. They came here the way kids came in our generation and the one before that. The kids are not different. What is it about adults and the ways in which we interact with children? Children didn't invent the cuss words they're using on the playground in the 3rd grade.
There you go.
The children didn't invent the violence. The children didn't invent all of the, you know, we rejoice about parents taking videos of themselves beating their children for twerking, but they didn't invent twerking either. And so I think that there's a big piece of there's an internal cultural thing we have to deal with about, do we think that all human beings are worthwhile? And when do you become a worthwhile human being? Is it after you get a job, after you pay your own rent, after you get your degree? When is it that you become worth something? And if we don't deal with that issue, we're not gonna have another generation to hand anything to.
I think we got Dr. Sancho and then we go to
This is really, I mean, boy, this is powerful. So powerful. So many ideas. But culture, I want to go back to that because Tariq mentioned it. And it was mentioned just now by Dr. Callahan, and also I think the ethic of risk. I'm going to go back to that for a moment and say this. That the issue with our children, which is a cultural issue, the issue with our lack of taking a risk for our own liberation even, these are at the foundation issues of the residuals of the enslavement. And we don't like to talk about that, but these are the facts. That the lack of agency itself, the lack of our willingness and our ability and our motivation for self-determination, for saying that if I recognize a problem, I must act, I must do something. We mentioned this earlier. Action is important. And because action is important, it has to be grounded somewhere. Why do I act? Why do I not act? And I do not act because there is this system that even Garvey, before King and Malcolm, saw. He said, everywhere I went, whether it was Panama, Costa Rica, or Jamaica, or Harlem, I see the same thing. I see African people in the same condition. And I see white people above them. That's not normal. The only normalcy would be that in some of those places, white people should be on the bottom. But the condition of African people themselves is a condition that we have not adequately seen, that our own agency cannot come unless we see that there is nothing more significant for our action than our own historical experiences. That's why we call on the names of the ancestors. That's why we say Harriet Tubman. That's why we say Malcolm. That's why we say Martin Luther King Jr. We are looking for that road, that pathway to our own self-determination and our own agency. So I think that it's complicated, but it's also simple. It's complicated, but we must ourselves harness the will and the energy to say enough is enough, and we will do what we must.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Asante, and for the question. One of the issues is that I can't get a good mic. Here we go. Some folk with me now, and I'm getting ready to start going. One of the challenges in our culture that we have to challenge is we don't love our children, we tolerate them.
That's what I'm talking about.
And we've got to get back to really loving our children, making them the center, making them our choice, really parenting them. I celebrate your right. Stop and frisk is illegal. You're right. We got to challenge the systems. And it may be, but we also have to love our children enough to say to them, it may be racist that they pulled you over. It may even be racist that they searched the car. It no longer is race when they find something. We gotta make up, that's not the popular thing to say. We got to talk about, yes, it may be racist that we have a prison industrial complex. We need to challenge the systems, but we also need to deal with the choices and how we make choices, how we parent so that they can make different choices. What does that look like? It also looks like modeling behavior that says we love each other. One of the things that we wanted to do with this meeting, and if you'll join me on WURD next week, we want to do a thing that African American organizations tend not to do. I've asked you to come, I've asked you to spend $35, but next week I'm going to tell you what happened with the money. Next week I want to model what goes on with the money by giving a financial report to the community. We're coming together, AmeriHealth, Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, Masjid Allah. We put this together, but the proceeds are going to go to the Melefi Asante Institute. This is not for either of our organizations. The reason that we've done that is because we want to model the ability to do something ourselves. There is no superstar from outside of Philadelphia coming in to save us. Everything you see on this stage, behind this stage, is in Philly, from Philly, by Philly. We are not being paid, but there are professionals around us who are homegrown. What you see can happen. We've lost a love for our children, and in this city, we've lost an appreciation for the great traditions, people, power, agency that we have. It's time for us to stop looking somewhere else for saviors and recognize that if we'll work together, make our institutions strong, model behavior that shows how we keep them strong, and then make room for the children that we have raised to take over when we're ready to turn it over. That's one way that we can make and that we can sustain beyond ourselves.
I got it.
Okay. I really want to take us somewhere here.
I mean, because we're tag teaming, and it wouldn't be right if I didn't go that. One of the things I want to be careful of, and you will see that when I said we're tag team and it was jovial and we laughed, that it actually is tag team. We do need to pass the baton, no doubt. We do need to groom individuals that are young, our youth, to take over these organizations, no doubt. But they're not ready yet, because we haven't done what we needed to do to get them ready. So although these organizations are dying because people are holding on to them, there's no doubt about that, who in the hell are we going to give it to? We have to be ready to do that. In order to be ready to do that, we have to deal with some real issues. What are those issues? First of all, pull your pants up. I don't want to see undies. And you know why? See, we tell people to do that, and we say it to children all the time, but we never tell them why to pull their pants up.
Right.
Other than that, their drawers may be dirty. What we should tell them is that came from prison. Because you can't wear a belt in prison. So your pants came down. So when John came home, he continued to wear his pants down because he was prisonized. That's what we got to talk about. We want to talk about our children and passing the baton, but let's talk about the white t-shirts. Why? Because it came from prison. They couldn't do nothing but wear those white t-shirts other than the blues. And so when we get out here, it becomes a fad to wear these t-shirts. I'm not talking, listen, I have 3 children that are the most important thing to me other than God and my family. I'm sorry, I don't want to get hit in the head. Fix that. Yeah, fix that right. But what I'm saying to you, if I was in school with Pastor Waller, I would be getting suspended and he would be in there. I just want you to know that. He said some things over here. That's why he took that mic off.
Cut it off.
But let me say this to you. In all candor, in all seriousness, we have to understand. I have 2 daughters. And they have killed me, but I don't think they came today, so I'm going to take this privilege. Both of them are blessed to be where they are in school. There's no doubt about it. It is a tremendous blessing. I know that it is a blessing, and I just got a little bit of work to do. But who are they going to marry?
That's right. That's right.
I also have a son. He's going to be 14 years old. He's getting ready to be groomed so somebody can marry a man. So when we ask the question about passing the baton, and when we ask the question about youth and starting there, we have to begin to deal with what do we have and how do we deal with it. And the way that you deal with that is you catch them young. Now I'm going to give some props here. I am the 65 American Mountaineering Bantam coach. 4-time champion out of 5 years, 2 years back to back. These kids are 8, 9, and 10. They call them tweens. And it's more than just football. You put a bunch of men around them.
That's right.
You be able to answer their questions. You have high expectations of them, and they perform. These kids have 80 plays. They run these plays as if they were in college, because that's our expectation. But if we gave them 5 plays, that would be their expectation. So let's stop talking about passing the baton until we raise our expectations. And before we can raise our expectations, my final thing, because I know I can go on for a couple of days.
I'm about to catch you.
And I'm just getting warm. Before we raise our expectations with respect to our kids respectfully, brothers, you better raise your expectations with respect to you. Keep your damn word. Can I say that? Keep your word. Support your family.
That's right.
Be a man. Be a man, not a male. Be a father, not a donor. And when we begin to do that, then I have a conversation for passing the baton. But you can't, to pass a baton to a child now, or to a teenager now, or to a young man now, not all, it's too general. To do it now, when people aren't ready, is a recipe for disaster. So let's get the army ready, and then we step back. I only feel that way now because I'm a little old.
Talk a little bit then about looking forward.
Yeah.
Martin, Malcolm had their, quote, eyes on the prize. You could loosely define the prize as freedom for Black people, humane treatment. What is the prize now? Is it still the same struggle, which we've been hearing? Is it a new part of the struggle? And how do we recognize that? Again, I keep going back to this, but in a way that allows us to loop in or keep in the loop the generation coming after us. What is the prize? What does the prize look like now?
It's just unity, brother.
Right. When Malcolm and King died, there were 250,000 people incarcerated. There are now 2.5 million. We've increased the prison population tenfold since Malcolm and Martin passed away. That is a crisis in and of itself. But we have to be sure to not just have the right sort of observation, which to some extent can be easy. We can look at the census, we can look at demographic data. We know there's 2.5 million people in prison. The question becomes, how do we make sense of why people are in prison?
Right.
Because, and I agree with Reverend Wilder and with Brother Shabazz, that responsibility is important. And taking responsibility is important. No one showed up to the March on Washington disheveled and drunk. Maybe they did, but that wasn't the dominant model, right? You know what I mean? Malcolm modeled discipline. Malcolm modeled keeping your word. Malcolm modeled showing up on time. He came out of a tradition that valued that. Even after he left the nation, he still modeled a very particular type of discipline. So I'm for that. What I don't want to do, though, is over-criminalize or overstate the role of responsibility. Good behavior doesn't stop you from getting locked up. Doesn't stop you getting pulled over. If good behavior worked, we wouldn't have been slaves. Right? It wasn't like we were poorly behaved people who got snatched up. You know what I mean? So there's an extent to which good behavior and responsibility is its own reward and should be valued. I don't know any parent that doesn't advocate that. I've never seen a black leader that doesn't push for that. Whether it was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, whether it was Marcus Garvey, we can go down the list. But I think we have to look at, and I'm just using the prison thing example because I don't even have that much time, but there's a million examples we could talk about. I want to look at the way in which people become criminals, which is bad choices.
Right.
But I also want to look at the way that people become criminalized,
Right.
which is about that empire thing. Because we didn't raise a generation of people who just are bad, or a generation of people who are just slow, can't run from the police. You know what I mean? We didn't. that ain't the problem. You know, we know for a lot of things, not being able to run ain't one of them. Over the last 40 years, we've seen the net of discipline expand, get wider, and we've seen it get deeper. You can get locked up for more stuff, and the penalties are greater. A girl in first grade about 5 years ago got locked up for yelling at her teacher. She yelled at her teacher, she was in first grade, they locked up for disorderly conduct. Now, all y'all got in trouble in school. I know some of y'all did. Y'all got pink slips, y'all got sent to the principal. Now that work is being done by law enforcement. They deepened the net. In the 80s, there were people who go up to Barberry. Some of y'all know y'all cousins. Y'all go up to Barberry. Y'all laughing because y'all know what it is. You go up to Barberry as a mental institution. They shut that down. So people who are in mental institutions are where? On the street. And then they made it illegal to be on the street.
That's right.
Right? They criminalized loitering, trespassing, panhandling, public drunkenness, all this stuff. So now people who are in mental institutions now are transcarcerated. They go from a place where they're getting help to a place where they're on the street to a place where they're criminalized. So we've criminalized homelessness. We've criminalized mental illness. People need medicine. They can't get it, so they smoke crack, and magically crack hits the streets at the same time this other stuff happens, and then we start a war on drugs. And we ain't won the war. Drugs are cheaper, easier to get, and stronger than ever, right? So what did it do? It took vulnerable people and put them in prison. So we've criminalized the medical addiction of drugs. Now, you shouldn't smoke crack. Anybody listening to me on the radio or here, I'm saying personally, do not smoke crack. It is a bad choice. But we've decided to buy into the public narrative that people who smoke crack aren't just making bad choices, is that they're bad people. And as a result of what Dr. Callahan is saying, they're not worthy of second chances. They're not worthy of being seen as human. And so when we put them in jail for 20 and 30 years while their white counterparts who are snorting cocaine are getting 2 years or a slap on the wrist, and they smoke crack too, right? But we ain't looking there. Because I went to Penn and I teach at Columbia, and if I went there tonight, you know how many people I can lock up for disorderly conduct, public drunkenness, civil possession of marijuana, a whole bunch of stuff. And smoking crack too, and the faculty too, and we ain't looking there. So a lot of it is not just about choice.
That's right.
It's about a structure that penalizes particular people's choices. Everybody is deserving of second chances. Everybody is. We need a law that doesn't let you off the hook for making bad choices, but that doesn't make you have to be perfect to navigate this world. That's all I'm saying. And so for me, when I think about moving forward, I want to create a law, I want to create a world where those laws aren't unjust, where they're not unequal, where you don't get stopped and frisked, where you're not destined for prison based on
some of
where
them
you
need
can
to
be.
be in jail.
Yeah, we probably disagree on that point. Now, they need to be somewhere.
No, we got some people need to be in jail, brother. We can play with it.
I disagree.
We can play with it all we want to.
See,
This is what I do for 25 years. We got some people that need to be there.
And this is where I take it. The dream. One of the reasons that we did this, if you would do a study, do a study on Detroit and DC. If you look at Detroit, you see what happens when certain factions decide, we're going to make this die. We're going to let this die. Because you won't let us in, we're going to let this politically die, economically, we're going to let it die. When you look at DC, we're going to make this live, but without you. Those of us, I'm 49, turning 50. When we were growing up, we called DC Chocolate City because it was 80% African American. It's less than 50% African American now. It's growing back. You used to look at a study of, we're going to make it live again, but without you. Well, here we are in Philadelphia. The question is it going to be DC or Detroit? Or are we going to get together, work together, navigate our differences, and make something different? Cities are going to come back, and the question is, are you going to be a part of the revitalization or not? If we stay divided, we will not be a part of the revitalization. They will relegate you to somewhere else and find a new native to do the work for them. Or we can decide that we will work together and we will be a part of the revitalization. I am grateful. I've been in Philadelphia for 20 years. Those of you that are not from Philadelphia can appreciate that when you come here, you got to get your Philly card. That's right. If you're not from Philly, Philly will let you know you are not from Philly. That's right. But if you get your Philly card, it is a wonderful place to be. Because in Philly, you are either loved or hated. But if you are loved, this is the place to live. And I love Philadelphia. And because I love Philadelphia, I want to be a part of the future that says we looked at, I'll show you my Philly card. That's a whole nother discussion. But the reality is, we can decide, is it going to be Detroit, DC, or a new type of Philadelphia? That's right. And that means the old conversation has to change. And we can start that. That's what this weekend is about. That's what our friendship is about. That's what I believe those of you who are in this building that you're going to work for. And I want to thank WURD. I want to thank you, Barbara. I want to thank all of you for being a part of this conversation, because the new way is thanking the old school. But we sit, as the African proverb says, we sit on an old mat weaving a new one.
Question for a panel. And we have seen some very, okay.
Let me just, I don't have my Philly card yet. I've only been here 10 years.
It's coming, it's coming, it's coming.
It's all right. You know, and I might get it taken. Because I actually think that the very conversation between Mark Hill and Tariq is the one that we have to have. The one, because it cuts, Mark says rightly, that he's talking about the prison industrial complex in a way that our attitudes about justice, about what this looks like, and about how we ought to act, and what the boundaries are. And not only what the boundaries are for proper and good behavior, but what's the right punishment if you exist outside of those boundaries. That this is the heart, and this goes back to this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about what does it mean to have a robust sense of what it means to be human beings, and which has to do with kind of basic. So from my perspective, nobody ought to go to jail for smoking crack their own self. The punishment for smoking crack is smoking crack. So I'm probably somewhere between y'all. I think prison ought to be a really uncommon solution to a problem. Somebody who ain't safe to be out with other people. But this larger question about how it starts, just reading a study that came out today that said African American children, both boys and girls, get suspended from preschool more than anybody else.
Right.
Now, there are a couple of pieces to this, right? One is all of their teachers in preschool ain't white. The people who are suspending them, the teachers, the preschool teachers, the administrators, their parents, those folks are black people. And I bet you if we polled this room and we talked about the behavior that got the kids suspended, we'd have a divided audience about whether the suspensions make sense. And yet, the reality of the track says, and is teaching us, that the pattern of suspending kids in preschool and suspending them in elementary school and so on, and having them miss significant amounts of school is directly related to their ending up in dropping out of school later and in jail.
So, but if we can't have the conversation about what's an appropriate punishment for stepping outside of the bounds of the ways in which we're trying to raise our children, or the ways in which we want people to live in the society we're in, if we can't iron that out amongst ourselves, whatever can we say to the state legislature? We will never have one voice to speak to anybody else if we can't wrestle with the question of what is justice, because that's what this is. For me, this is what it's about. This is about what does justice actually look like in practice? And what do we do with the people? Because you said our cousins wear Blackberry, right? We got the proverbial crazy uncle. We all got people in our lives and in our families, and some of us are those people who just live.
Got that right.
Who live outside the boundaries. And so what are we gonna do with them? And how?
I gotta give you the rapid rap.
Okay, I'm wrapping it up. So what are we gonna do, both from a criminal perspective and also just, you make me uncomfortable perspective, about the people who live outside of the boundaries of what we think is appropriate?
Right.
And how we gonna iron that out?
This is the hardest moderating job I have ever had, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly. We want to give our audience a chance to ask some questions. So I think there's some folk around with mics, and so if you lift up your hands, we can start to open this up to the audience. The question is, why can't we all live like Jesus Christ? It's directed to Pastor Waller.
That's exactly right. Now, I can't speak for every Christian from all over the world. Every faith has those that walk the faith the way it's supposed to be walked. I'm sorry that you bumped into somebody that doesn't walk it that way. But I got you.
Yeah, but you gotta let him answer the question, man.
And I am sorry that you have bumped into a few people, or a lot of people, that don't walk that way. But that's the challenge of us not painting any faith with a broad brush. And what we're trying to do here is start something new in the conversation. And so I apologize to you for anybody that has ever hurt you. And if you think it's me that hurt you, then maybe we can talk about it. And but I can't respond to you for everybody. And the word proselytizing that you were using, that's exactly what's not going on tonight. That's exactly what's not going on. Now I am, and let me just be very, very clear, I am an evangelical Christian. I do love Jesus Christ, believe he died on the cross for my sins, and I stand on that faith. But that faith teaches me to love everybody that the Father created. And the greatest way that I can preach that is live that. There's a quote that says, preach a sermon every day, and when necessary, use words.
There's a question here. I'm sorry, who is anointed? There you go. Can we get her a mic, please, so people can hear it?
And just for the sake of time, we ask everybody to just ask a question, preferably within 15 seconds, just so everybody can go respectfully.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a lady with the mic, and then this is her. You're here with the mic, sister. Yeah.
I just one big comment and a question.
Sister, honestly, I can't comment. What's your question? Yeah.
The question is, do you think that there is a spiritual sort of disease in our African American community that is the root cause of all of these issues? And if so, could you comment on that?
Now there's a question.
I'll take it.
Yes, it's called white supremacy. And it plays out. I mean, it is a spiritual disease. It is about internalizing the perspective that whiteness is God. And so, and to the extent that one recognizes oneself as black, then if you internalize the idea that all that is good is white, then you don't see yourself as worthy or good, or anybody who looks like you is worthy or good. And that is, I mean, that's real. And it is, Professor Asante talks about, I mean, it's real.
Perfect. Excellent. I agree.
Anyone else? Sister over here in the print dress. We're trying to get her a good mic, is what we're talking about, I think, yes? Okay.
And we at Penn Charter.
No, we're gonna go in turn. The sister here is getting waiting patiently.
Thank you all for your comments. So one of the things that's very important to me is to be very precise with language. And one of the things that was discussed earlier was about us coming together with a common ground of blackness. So I really want an understanding of how the panelists view blackness, especially with the increasing number of immigrants here from African communities who may not view blackness in the same way that we do, and an understanding of blackness that not just sort of implicitly talks about masculinity, but also includes a feminine vision of blackness. A blackness that's not defined necessarily about our relation to oppression, but a blackness that embraces a vision. And so I think that that's something that's extremely important when we talk about how to move forward.
And the question is then, how do we define and view blackness?
Yeah, well, the way...
Can we pass the mic down to Dr. Sunday? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. It was an excellent question. I think the way we have to do it is as a Pan-African, transgenerational, transcontinental, transcultural, and one that respects all people, all people, all black people, because this is talking about blackness now, regardless of gender, class, religion. Now, when you start talking about that, what you mean is that the Haitian or the Jamaican is as much a black person as a person who's African American. I know some people try to make distinctions, but you have to take a Pan-African view. I mean, African problems, and I've traveled all over the world, and I've found that African problems are the same. Whether you're in Mobile or Johannesburg, or whether you're in Lagos or Accra, whether you're in Paris or London, it's the same. So part of it is that we have our individual and specific histories, but we also have this common history and common narrative of African people and African blackness, and we've got to deal with that. And I just want to take a moment to say this about the empire, because it relates to this. I am deeply involved in the issues of Sudan, for example, right? And it's almost invisible in the African American community. And yet Sudan, Chad, Congo, Zimbabwe, I mean, why do we still have sanctions on Zimbabwe? If we really truly got involved in a Pan-African notion of blackness, we would raise a lot of different questions, even about our foreign policy. I mean, why did we bomb Libya? A whole lot of questions that need to be asked. But I'm not going to ask them tonight.
We would have to separate y'all in class.
Sis, I want to thank you for that, and I want to tell a very quick story as to why we're giving the money from the show to the Malefi Asante Institute, because we have to have more conversations around this issue. Let me share sensitivity that happened at Enoch. We built a new building, and about 3 years after we were in, I began to see a number of white people who were coming to church. So I want to be sensitive. I know my language. I think anybody in majority ought to always think about how your privilege is treating the least of these. So I know how I can personalize black pain, so on and so forth. And so I said one day from the pulpit, I would like all the non-African Americans to meet with me. What I was saying in my head was the 20 white people that I see coming to church. I want you to come and meet with me, because I was really going to ask the question, how is it for you in here? When I begin to talk about how is it for you in here, not that I'm going to change my language, but I need to be sensitive to how I am. Now, much to my surprise, when I got in the room, there were a couple hundred people in there that looked like me.
because what I had said in my ignorance, all non-African Americans. So there were persons in there, one brother said, you know, I'm Haitian. I know what you meant, Pastor, but we wanted you to understand a thing about language. I'm Haitian. I don't identify with that term, African American. One brother we had played ball with, I had played ball with, thought I knew, looked me dead in the face, began to speak Spanish. Then he said, all right, Bobby, I bet you ain't know. And literally, it was my own cultural history lesson and sensitivity lesson. That when we say black, when I'm saying black, I'm not talking about just black people with a particular connection to Mississippi and the South and slavery. And that is why we cannot repair just along those lines. And that is why also we want to say, let's take these dollars, let's challenge Malefi to have forums, and let's help him have forums where we can come together, not for the purpose of proselytizing, but come together to talk about what is it that we share, what is common to the Haitian, to the Jamaican, to the African American, to the African, what is common to those from East Africa, from South Africa, from West Africa, that is real for all of us as we experience blackness in the United States, but also as we are connected throughout the diaspora. And that's exactly what this is about. And for us, it's going to be a lesson, because I had to learn a lesson about using that term. And that's what we want you to get from this weekend, and what we want all of us to recognize, that black is black, but all black ain't the same kind of black. And that's the beauty of what it is to be black.
You know, and lastly, we'll just sum it up. If you're Haitian and Jamaican or from another part of the country or another part of the world, when you come to Philadelphia and the cop pull you over, he doesn't ask you if you're African. He doesn't ask you if you're Haitian. He say, black male pulled over. So we can play games, and that doesn't mean forget your culture. And I don't mean to be disrespectful by saying play games. But what we're talking about right now is the things that affect anyone that looks like us with melanin in their skin. And if you fit that description, stand in line. That's what we're saying. Like my brother, I've had the opportunity, I've been blessed to travel. And I can assure you, there is no place on the planet, no place, even in Africa, where black people or Africans are respected. Respected. As an American, and you know, I'm a little dark, and I get a little dark in, you know, heat places and hot places with sun. And when Saudi Arabia, when you make Hajj, you wear 2 pieces of cloth. Everyone looks the same, or dressed the same. But I look just like my brothers from Africa. But let me tell you something. When I open my mouth, they leave me alone. Because that English means I'm an American, I'm an Enrique. But when my mouth is closed, I can't go certain places. So that tells me whether they're Jamaican, Haitian, or anything else, if you look like me, or look like my brother, we from the same place. I just wanted to simplify that.
Okay, we've got a couple of things going on. There's a sister back here with the mic. I know that you've been waiting, and so have you. So after that, I want you to get to these ladies here, please. Sister in the blue with the mic.
But, I want to thank all the panelists, but my question is to Dr. Asante. All the panelists talked about Black unity, and I just want to address to you, Dr. Asante, how can you justify your betrayal of your colleague, Dr. Montero, from Temple University? How can you, because we're talking about Black community, so we need to discuss struggles that's happening right in our community. So how can you justify the betrayal of your colleague? And secondly,
well, let me deal with that first question.
Can I say it real quick?
No, you asked one question.
Answer that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sister, respectfully, I do believe that is a discussion that you might want to have. Unfortunately, this forum right here, the purpose of this forum is to talk about, no, listen to me, hold up, sis, because I didn't interrupt you. I intentionally been quiet so that you can finish. I didn't interrupt you at all. The purpose of this forum is not that. It really is. And hold on a second, sis. Let me say this to you, sister. respectfully, when you invite me to your forum, then you can tell me what the agenda is and I'll respect it. But when you come to a forum that we invite you to, that's not our agenda. Respectfully, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I'm not going to allow this arena to be used for that political football. We can deal with that another time. But we won't deal with it here. And he said he would be very happy to talk to you afterwards. In fact, you probably can get more information in a private conversation.
You need to get to the sister here in the pink and then the sister in the green.
I don't know.
People have been waiting. I just need to, because they were the first ones to have their hands up, and then I'll get right to you, sister, I promise. Go ahead.
I thank you for allowing me to speak, and also, I think the sister does ask a valuable question about addressing conflict within and among us. So I'm happy to hear that you're willing to have a conversation offline. My question is, how do you personally address your embodied racism and your embodied mental illness because of that racism? I do cultural competency work within academia. I'm a dance movement therapist. I resent the fact that movement as a healing tradition has been taught to me through academia and through a white Eurocentric system, and I am fighting that every day. However, I realize that I have to have my own personal practice of continuing to encounter my embodied racism and my critique of myself to get rid of that stuff, because it comes up every day, all the time,
Okay, so we need to capture your question.
I think that was.
Because I'm preaching and teaching about it, so what I'm saying is, when I go to someone else's forum, it allows me to emotionally confront that, and I would like to know, what is your practice to do that in yourselves and in your families about the light skin, dark skin thing and some other embodiment principles?
Yeah. I think. That's a heck of a question. Yeah, I know. First time I was thinking, give us the mic. We all give us the mic. My own practice is an imperfect one. Some of it is about reflecting on my own sort of choices in life. Like sometimes you gotta look back and say, who did I date? Right? You gotta say, what type of people do I gravitate toward? What kind of shows do I watch? What do I find beautiful? Now, I've been blessed to grow up in a certain kind of household and to have certain kinds of figures around me and to sort of be moved in a certain way. So the color thing isn't necessarily my issue per se, but that kind of practice, about questioning the choices I make. And when I find myself, and I think all of us every day have to kind of unlearn white supremacy. All of us have to unlearn male privilege. All of us have to unlearn homophobia, which we ain't talked about. All of us, and that's another space we could probably enter a really interesting conversation about Martin and Malcolm, if it wasn't 825. But there are these spaces where I got to confront my own stuff. Because particularly as a professional critic, where I can always say what everybody else did wrong. So if I'm looking at the Lupita phenomenon, right? I find Lupita Nyong'o beautiful, and the world finds her beautiful. They're captivated by her this week, right? But the question becomes to some extent not just what about the thousands of white people, of black people that Hollywood didn't love, that look just like her, right? Including Gabby from Precious, right? But also, how many of us in our own community have dated the Lupitas in our classrooms or on our blocks? Or how many did we walk? You see what I'm saying? Because when she talks about her pain, it isn't from white folk. It's from black men, right? People got Whoopi Goldberg, same thing. I talked to Whoopi the other day. She said everybody got mad at me for dating Ted Danson. She said, but the same black men that got mad at me for dating the white man, wouldn't date me. So that's sort of how I engage this. What kind of jokes do I make when I'm with my friends? What kind of conversations do I have with my homies about certain things? And that kind of a practice forces me to be self-critical. But the thing I've also learned, Bell Hooks taught me this through her writing, is that you have to always confront yourself with compassion and love. Because that's also tough. We can be really hard on ourselves and not love or forgive ourselves either. So for me, it's a practice of meditation, it's a practice of healing, it's a practice of prayer, maybe not as much as I should, but...
We got a professor.
That's good.
Right. Surrounded, Mike.
Right. But I'm just saying, y'all passed y'all gave it, Mike, so I'm good. Right. No, so that becomes for me it's a spiritual practice, it's an intellectual practice, but it's always a self-critical one. Yeah.
Look, people have just made a liar, okay, because I can't take all of the questions that I promised to take. We've got a sister here who has the next question, and that, I think, is going to be our last question, I was told. Okay, just hang on one second. We got to go here, and I've got to get permission to take another question after that, seriously.
Yes, as a foster parent of 15 children and adoptive parent of 5 older boys. My question is around the what we call the third industrial complex. I've heard a little bit about it on the panel, so I'm very pleased that I heard about mass.
Okay, we got to have a quick question, sis.
Quick question is, what are we going to do to help save vulnerable families? It was skirted on the panel, but there are hundreds of thousands of people, I'm just going to go in Pennsylvania, who are forcibly losing custody of their children, going into foster care, being suspended from those schools, and also going into mental institutions and having all kinds of challenges. So we're not preserving these vulnerable families, mentoring to them, helping them, and stopping the forcible.
Okay, again, I got to wrap you. So the question is, what are we doing to help these vulnerable families?
Yes, so the children will not go into foster care and forced adoption. Thank you.
Anyone?
Well, I think you're raising a community question, you're raising an economic question, you're raising also a question of coming alongside of children and helping the parenting process. Of course, an economic question is we have to stand in advocacy for jobs, we have to stand in advocacy for health care. And so that's one piece, of recognizing the purchase of PGW and making sure that the privatization of that, we make room not just for board positions for people, but for real jobs, for the 1,500 jobs that are going to come into the city as a result of that purchase, making sure that those jobs go to people so that they can make a living wage. So it's an economic question. But then there's also, as it relates to the prison industrial complex, we've got to start really loving our children, getting involved with them at an early age. One of the things that we do at the TAB, I have a group called Young Abrahams. Young Abrahams are from 7 to 9 years old. One of the things that we tend to do is we wait till they're teenagers to try to change the flow of the river. When the prison industrial complex is looking at what's going on with them when they're 5, 6, 7, 8, at 7, 8, 9, young Abrahams are with me. We read, we learn manners, we learn how to open the doors, we learn how to speak, we learn how to shake hands. What we try to do with them is just do some basic stuff. Teaching reading, well, not teaching reading, supporting reading. So we get together and we read books. I read in front of them, and it's important that I do it and not assign it to someone, because sometimes the champion needs to be in the mix at that age. And so we sit together and we read. And I'm not trying to make a braggadocious statement about myself. It's just in that system, I represent that system. And so if I'm there, it says to these 7, 8, 9-year-olds, well, this must be really important if he's here. And so we read together and we learn some of the things that fathers were to teach sons, and we learn some of the things that families were to do. And we come alongside of families to support what is being done there. If we can get a child at 7, 8, or 9 reading fluently, and then after fluency comes comprehension, we get that, and he loves to do that. If we get him not afraid to shake hands, look people in the eye, building self-confidence, one of the things that we teach is real simple. What's your name? How old are you? What school do you go to? And what grade are you in? And be able to say that. And then on the Sundays, we have them to talk to people who are older than them, to shake hands, to not be afraid of someone who has authority, to not be afraid of a male voice, to spend that type of time. That may sound simple and sophomoric, but I think it is the little practical things. And the young Abrahams are for the boys that don't play football as well, because many of our children are going to be athletic, but not all of them. How do our children spell love? T-I-M-E. We got to give them some time. And if you give them some time, if we come alongside of families and recognize that while the nuclear family is important, it has never been enough.
Well, as a conservative Christian, I'm going to teach that men and women ought to be married and that they ought to raise their children and we live in our homes together. But whether it is a man and a woman in that house by themselves, or a woman in that house by herself, or a man in that house by themselves, that house alone is not enough. It's always taken a whole village. That village includes the family, it includes the extended family, and until we get back to the neighborhood and get back to the community and advocate for jobs, but also let me help you with your child when your child gets to the age where he or she will naturally question what you have taught them because you raised a good child. If you parent right, you are going to raise a critical thinker. And when that critical thinker gets to an age combined with that thing called adolescence, which is a chemical imbalance, they're going to begin to think that you are crazy. If they don't have an uncle or an aunt or a play cousin or somebody else who comes along that side to reinforce what they think is a crazy mother, then we're always going to lose. So it's economic, and then it is communal, and then it is struggling together. The day you don't understand your child is the day I'm supposed to come alongside and help you with that child. And then we have to wait. You gotta wait because they don't say thank you at 16. You gotta wait till they're 33 to say thank you. My mother is still hearing sermons where I say thank you because she didn't get thank you when I was 16. She got... And that's the stuff that we have to do in order to save those families.
Okay, we've got one last question, sister, it's yours, and we need a rapid response.
Okay.
This question is in reference to revitalization. Where do African American females go for the support or the knowledge besides the politician who refers you to the attorney, who's with the developer and eventually tries to bamboozle you out of your anchor in your promised land, or your very what would you call it? No, your prime land. Thank you.
You see I'm looking like this. And the only reason I look that way, sister, is because there's no simple answer. We have a responsibility, and I'm speaking specifically of the alleged professionals in the audience. And notice I said alleged professionals, because you have a degree don't mean you're professional. But those individuals that actually are professional, we have an obligation and a responsibility to our community. There's a picture that hangs in my office, and Rashida will remember it. And we have this picture. It's called He Ain't Heavy. I ain't the only one with it. There's 1,000 people with that. But the purpose of the picture and the premise behind the picture is to show an African man, or a black man, since, if I say African, it's a little problem. A black man leaning down and pulling up someone else. The better question, if I can rephrase your question, and I often do that, is why aren't we responsible in helping our sisters or our brothers when we have certain skills that we've been blessed to get? And that's because we don't feel a sense of obligation to our community at all. And the only way that I can really answer that question is to find someone who's sincere. And unfortunately, that may take you a little while to find that. And that's an unfortunate thing, and that's an indictment on us. But that is the only thing that I basically can say. And I'm going to tell you something else. You might find somebody sincere that might want to help you that don't look like you. And so don't be afraid. And hope before you meet me at my car, I'm not saying not to hold black, and I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is hold everyone accountable. And if in fact you find someone who will answer your question and assist you with sincerity and integrity, I wouldn't care if he was purple from Mars. The last thing I want to say is this. You talked about politicians. That is another reason why we are doing this. See, we don't hold politicians accountable. Mayor Nutter got it, and I curse Nutter out all the time. His face, on radio, it never matters, so nobody say I just did it here. He was invited to come. He could have came, and he's invited to come tomorrow. I got a ticket for him. But the bottom line is this. When he stood on the podium, he said to people that look like you and I am the educational man. That's what he said. The only educational system that's getting money is CCP because that's where he's going to retire to. He has not done anything for education. So let me ask you a question. What have we done to hold him accountable? We haven't done anything. So now we have to hold those politicians accountable who are supposed to help us and don't. I hate to say this, but I want you to take a look at it. Kathleen Kane kind of quashed an investigation that involves a lot of people that look like you for doing some things that white folks have been doing for years, but they shouldn't have done. But should we have? And do we exemplify integrity? That's why Pastor Wallace said to you, don't worry about it, we're going to show you accountability. Neither him or I, I'm glad you said it, I'm going to say it again, we ain't getting a dime. And we spent a lot of time trying to get ready to get up here and embarrass ourselves in front of you guys for the next 2 days. But when we put our money somewhere, when we put our vote somewhere, who do we hold accountable? Who do we hold accountable? No, we don't hold them accountable. We come to forums and we complain. Remember, voice or actions. That's right. I'm from the school of thought, where if you see something against humanity that's incorrect, unjust, and wrong, you correct it with your hand. Absolutely. If you have the inability to correct it with your hand, you correct it with your tongue. If you have the inability to correct it with your hand and your tongue, you correct it by hating it in your heart, which is the weakest form of correcting it. Which one are you going to do?
Thank you. So, keep on clapping, because we've got to wrap this up. We could do it for another hour, but I know that I have a mind and a heart full of thankfulness to Dr. Malefi Asante, to Greek El-Shabbat, Reverend Alan Waller, Dr. Martha Montero, and Dr. Leslie Callahan. Thank you very much. Just a moment, I just want to bring Sarah back up to kind of close this out, but I'd also like to thank you all for coming here and being such a great audience. Yeah, I just want to echo my thanks to all of the panel, which is amazing. And these are the issues that we talk about every day on WURD. You're going to hear these people on WURD on a regular basis, so please tune in. That's something simple. 900 AM WURD, 900 AM WURD.com. Download our app. Take us wherever you go. We need your support. And I just want to say one other thing, that Dr. Asante's Institute is getting the proceeds from this play, but I want to underscore that Pastor Waller also supports the radio station. He really puts his money where his mouth is. Every time they have some type of activity, they support WURD as a vehicle to promote what they're doing. And I appreciate that he does not just talk the talk, he walks the walk. And that's what this is about as well. So I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank Barbara Grant for doing a difficult and worthy job. And I invite all of you to stop by our WURD table and take a look at some of the upcoming events that we have. And like I said, continue to tune in and participate in the conversations that we're having so that we can begin as a community to come up with solutions. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.